watching the events in the past few days, I mean over the weekend and today, and what was the end of this whole story, it is quite clear that that was simply a demonstration. He never had any intention to march on Moscow that was announced, and to start a rebellion or mutiny or whatever, to change the government, to come to Moscow, because that was from the very beginning, one should understand that was quite senseless. But what he wanted to show is quite certainly to show that he is a man at least equal to the defense minister, to other generals, and he has his right to decide on many things, and specifically on how the money should be distributed in this game. And that was the whole story. So it was not to take Moscow, not to show anything, because from the very beginning he declared that he is completely for Putin, he is against Ukraine, he is supporting the war in Ukraine, and all that sort of things. But he still demonstrated that he wants to be higher than he is at the moment. That's why he made this demonstration.
So when he says we didn't march to overthrow Russia's leadership, you think that's correct, do you? You don't think he's just trying to save face?
No, to my mind, this is absolutely correct. This is absolutely correct, and one should believe him, actually.
How significant do you think, though, it was that Prigozhin not only moved into and apparently seized control of one fairly sizable city, but also did so openly criticizing the way that President Putin and his leading commanders have conducted the war in Ukraine?
First of all, we should actually realize why he came to Rostov. And he came to Rostov, I don't think too many people know that at that time, Minister Shoigu and General Gerasimov were both in Rostov, within the southern military district, and that's why he actually came to Rostov to talk to them and to show them to show him his power and to demonstrate to show the meeting. And they disappeared immediately. Shoigu, as far as I know, left on his helicopter in some direction, unknown direction, and Gerasimov was hiding somewhere in the safe house. So after staying some time in Rostov, he just again made a gesture of going to all his activities during those days are important and not important because they showed any sort of a support for a mutiny or a rebellion against Putin in this country. But they are important because they demonstrated that Kremlin has been shaken after those events. Putin does not have any control over the situation, that the army is in extremely poor condition, that a lot of people secretly oppose Putin's politics and support those who try to rebel, or what they think that try to rebel against the war, do not support the war itself, and many other things.
I just want to stop you there because you said so many important things there. You are saying that when Prigozhin took his troops into Rostov-on-Don and apparently had tanks there in the streets in control of the city, he'd only gone there to talk to Shoigu and Gerasimov, who are the leading military figures when it comes to the war in Ukraine.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. To my mind, as far as I know from my sources, that was the only aim of his coming to Rostov. And when he realized that he would not be able to get them, he told everybody, and he announced that he is now marching on Moscow. It's just to demonstrate.
Let me ask you then, you said that this shows that a lot of people secretly in Russia do not support the way that President Putin is ruling, and in particular, the war in Ukraine. Do you think that the actions of Prigozhin, this rather audacious criticism and the march, which was seen as a direct challenge to Putin's authority at the time, do you think that that will encourage more dissent within the country, even though, of course, there are huge risks in doing so in Russia?
Well, I do not actually think so. I was watching the footage today from Rostov and seeing plenty of people just celebrating and greeting the army, greeting the Prigozhin's tanks, and bringing them piroshki and other things, and obviously openly supporting him. But what's going to happen next, we all know very well. A lot of figures who announced their support for Prigozhin have already been arrested. Those who are seen in the footage will definitely be arrested in the next few days. People might secretly be increasing their feeling against the war, but they will not demonstrate anything, and they will not dare to go on the streets to show anything, because this is really very, very dangerous today. And everybody, believe me, everybody, including Prigozhin, will be very severely punished.
But Prigozhin, as we understand it, has gone to Belarus. I mean, what do you make of that deal there with President Lukashenko?
Another interesting thing that became known to me right now when I was thinking about the situation is that there were actually two people who took part in the negotiations. And this is quite interesting because one person was Lukashenko, as we all know, and another person was Patrushev, chairman of the National Security Council and the former head of the FSB, and a very, very influential figure in Russia.
In Russia, this is, rather than in Belarus.
Well, I mean, this itself is very interesting. The Belarus, I mean, Lukashenko was chosen because he's for Putin, he's the man who can negotiate. But there was no sense to negotiate with Prigozhin, actually, because they simply explain to him what's going to happen to him and what happens to his money already.
So where do you think this leaves Prigozhin and the Wagner group, which he heads? They were, of course, playing a hugely significant role in parts of the front line in Ukraine around Bakhmut and so on. I mean, are those forces going to still be fighting in Ukraine? And if they're not going to do it, do you think those Russian soldiers who are left there on the front line will still want to do it?
I'm pretty convinced that that's the end of the Wagner group. And, of course, this is very good for Ukraine because they were really quite a formidable force, which they were fighting much better than the whole Russian army. This all we know. Prigozhin, I'm afraid he should take great care of his life, but that will not last long. He will not last long. We are talking about probably days, maximum weeks, and he'll be over. The soldiers, the Wagner group, will not anymore. None of them will remain on the front line, and they would be dealt with personally, everybody of them. I'm pretty sure about this.
So just finally then, some commentators have seen the events of the last few days as the beginning of the end of President Putin. You seem to be suggesting that although it has shown his weaknesses, he's simply going to strengthen his grip on power.
I think so. Yes, he indeed demonstrated terrible weaknesses. He left Moscow together with Medvedev. There were a lot of private jets going from Moscow airports in different directions, including foreign countries. This is true, but I think he will come back, or he came back already, actually, and his grip on power will be strengthened. I'm pretty sure about it. We shall see in the next day things that we do not know and that we cannot decide today. That's important because it's important what forces were on the side of the opposition to Putin, and if those forces were strong enough to have their word, that will be shown in the next few days. But at the moment, or at least in the next few days, Putin will definitely strengthen his grip on power.